Emily Parker told herself she was too old to be nervous on a first day, but her hand still trembled slightly as she parallel parked her beat-up silver Corolla in front of the tall brownstone on a quiet, tree-lined street in Brooklyn. The kind of street where kids' scooters were abandoned on stoops and string lights framed windows that glowed warm even in the cold gray of a New York January morning. And as she cut the engine, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the rearview mirror. Wide brown eyes, dark hair twisted into a low, messy bun, lipstick already fading, and whispered under her breath, "You've got this, Em. It's just a job." Even though the flutters in her stomach insisted it felt like more than that, like the first step into a life she wasn't entirely sure she belonged in, a life that sounded like something out of one of the online stories she listened to while scrolling job listings at midnight. She grabbed her tote bag, double-checked the address on her phone, and replayed the ad in her mind as she climbed the stone steps. Family assistant / part-time nanny needed for single father, Brooklyn, flexible hours, competitive pay. She remembered the interview at the coffee shop a week earlier when he'd walked in, Jason Cole, and she thought, a little stupidly, that he looked like he'd been generated from a Pinterest board titled "Tired but Somehow Still Handsome New York Dads," tall and broad-shouldered in a navy coat with faint coffee stains on one cuff, dark blonde hair that needed a trim, a neatly trimmed beard that could not quite hide the tension in his jaw, and those cool blue eyes that made her feel like he saw straight through her rambling explanations about community college and side gigs and needing a job that could flex around her psych classes. He had shaken her hand, firm but not crushing, and listened while she talked about her younger siblings back in Ohio, how she'd grown up basically co-parenting, how she was good with kids and chaos and schedules. And he had nodded, explained the job in measured, practical terms, help with school emails, grocery orders, appointments, pick up his 5-year-old daughter Lily in the afternoons, keep the house from falling apart while he drowned in code and meetings. Nothing glamorous, nothing dramatic, just life. But the whole time, while she tried to focus on sounding competent and not desperate, her eyes kept catching on the simple silver wedding band on his left hand, the way it flashed when he lifted his coffee cup, and her brain, traitor that it was, started building a story around it. A wife stationed overseas, or working in another state, or in grad school, someone too busy to be home in the afternoons, single father on paper, but married in reality, complicated grown-up stuff she had no business imagining. She told herself firmly, it doesn't matter. He's your potential boss, not a character in a romance podcast. And by the end of the interview, when he'd said, "You seem like a good fit, Emily. Let's try it for a month and see," she'd felt more relief than anything else. Now, standing in front of his door, she pressed the doorbell and heard the muffled chime echo through the house, followed by the thump, thump, thump of small feet and a high voice yelling, "I'll get it, Daddy! I'll get it!" Before the door flew open and a small whirlwind appeared, a little girl in rainbow leggings and a unicorn sweatshirt, curly light brown hair exploding out of 2 uneven pigtails, hazel eyes bright and curious, who stared up at Emily and announced solemnly, "You're the new Emily, right?" Which made absolutely no sense until Jason appeared behind her in jeans and a black t-shirt, wiping his hands on a dish towel, that polite half-smile crossing his face as he said, "She means the new helper, but yes, this is Emily. Emily, this is Lily, the fiercest 5-year-old in Brooklyn." And Lily planted her hands on her tiny hips, examined Emily like she was a new toy, and demanded, "Do you know how to make dinosaur-shaped pancakes?" Making Jason groan. We talked about not interrogating people at the door, and Emily laughed in spite of herself, answering, "I can definitely learn." And the way Jason's shoulders loosened at that sound told her he hadn't heard a lot of easy laughter in this hallway for a while. As she stepped inside, she felt the warmth of the house wrap around her, that mix of coffee, laundry detergent, and something sweet, maple syrup maybe, and thought, this feels like a home, not just a place where people sleep. A thought that made her suddenly aware of how small and temporary her own studio apartment felt by comparison. In the first few weeks, her jobs sorted themselves into a rhythm before she'd even realized it was happening. Mornings at community college, huddled over textbooks in the library or scribbling notes in psych lecture, a quick subway ride back to her neighborhood, then out again to the brownstone, letting herself in with the keypad code he'd added to the door for her. The house was usually quiet when she arrived around noon, sunlight pooling on the hardwood floors, the dishwasher humming softly, a stray toy car abandoned under the coffee table. Kids' drawings taped crookedly to the fridge in neon crayon, tiny glimpses of a life lived in between deadlines.
She'd tidy the breakfast chaos, put in a load of laundry, answer school emails, or sign digital permission slips Jason had forwarded with a frazzled, "Can you handle this?" attached, order groceries, and stare at the shared family calendar app on her phone like it was a video game she was slowly learning the rules to. At 2:30, she'd grab her coat, head to Lily's daycare or kindergarten, depending on the day, and collect the little girl, who, after one cautious week of side-eye, had quickly decided Emily was my person and now launched herself into her arms almost every afternoon, backpack bouncing against her shoulders as she chatters about show-and-tell or spelling games. Afternoons became a blur of snacks. Apple slices cut into moons, celery turned into ants on a log, dinosaur-shaped peanut butter sandwiches when Emily had the patience, coloring at the coffee table, reading the same picture books so many times she could recite them with her eyes closed, and elaborate imaginary games where Lily turned herself into a superhero mermaid doctor and insisted Emily play the sidekick, victim, and villain all at once. Through this, Emily learned the texture of their world in small details, that Lily hated socks with seams because they felt like rocks, that she loved both superheroes and mermaids and saw no contradiction in that she could go from giggling to tears in 10 seconds when tired, and that if you sat on the floor long enough listening to a ramble about a rainbow dragon who lived under the stove, you started to feel like that dragon was almost real. She learned, too, that Jason worked in tech in Manhattan, some systems architecture team. "Basically, I break stuff on purpose so other people know how not to break it," he'd joked once, and that he had the peculiar absent look of someone whose brain often lived behind a screen of code even when his body was very much present. He left early most mornings, suit jacket over his arm, messenger bag slung across his chest, travel mug in one hand, pausing at the door every time to let Lily throw her arms around his waist and plant sticky kisses on his cheek, always saying without fail, "Thank you, Emily. I'll be back by 6 if the world cooperates," in that calm, slightly wry tone that hid how often the world did not, in fact, cooperate. She noticed he never took off his wedding ring. It gleamed on his left hand when he reached for his phone, when he tugged Lily's tangled hair into something resembling pigtails, when he ran that hand through his own hair in frustration over some bug he was trying to explain to her in terms of Lego towers or crooked bridges. Once, when he came home late, tie loosened, exhaustion written in the slump of his shoulders, he'd found her still folding Lily's tiny unicorn socks at the kitchen table and said, "You didn't have to stay," and she'd shrugged. The laundry monster was winning. And he smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes, but his fingers had still curled reflexively around the ring, thumb rubbing it like a worry stone. And Emily's imagination, never content with mystery, filled in blanks. A wife working overseas, maybe. Some complicated arrangement where both adults were doing their best and failing and trying again. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, about 6 weeks into the job, when the story she'd built in her head started to crack. Lily's daycare called to say a pipe had burst and they were closing early, so Emily drove over through the downpour, wipers squeaking across the windshield, found Lily waiting by the door with a glittery backpack and a stuffed purple octopus, and got begged into building a blanket for it. By 3 o'clock, the living room had transformed into Fort Lily, an ambitious construction of chairs, sheets, and a string of Christmas lights Emily had unearthed from a box in the closet under the stairs. They lay inside with popcorn, the storm drumming on the windows while an animated movie flickered on the TV, until the noise softened to a steady patter and Lily announced that obviously her dolls needed their own fort upstairs. Emily followed her up to the second floor, where Lily's room, an explosion of pink and teal and gold, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, tiny plastic animals lined on shelves like an army, faced Jason's more restrained bedroom across the hall, doors usually open except when he was changing or on a work call. "We need the blue blanket," Lily declared, flipping through the chaos of her closet. "The soft one with the clouds. Mommy used to—" She froze, small shoulders tensing, then corrected herself too quickly. I think it's in Daddy's room." The word mommy hit the air and hung there like a soap bubble. Emily's heart gave an odd squeeze, but she said nothing, just followed as Lily marched into Jason's room like she owned the place. Emily had only ever stepped just far enough inside to drop off clean laundry. The space felt almost hotel neat. King-size bed with a dark gray duvet, matching nightstands, a tall dresser, a single-framed photo turned slightly away on the bedside table, and a large window looking down onto the street. Lily went straight to the sliding door closet and pulled one panel open with both hands.
It's back there somewhere, she said, pointing toward the upper shelves. Daddy says I'm too little to climb the chair. He's right, Emily murmured automatically, but her focus snagged on the neat rows inside. Collared shirts, shoeboxes labeled in precise handwriting, winter clothes, old tech, Lily's baby stuff. And up on the top shelf, a plain brown cardboard box pushed to one side with a faded sticky note stuck to the front. Even from below, she could make out one word, written in loopy cursive and underlined twice. Mommy. The word slammed into her chest. For a second, she thought she must be misreading it, that it said memory or morning or something equally boring, but no. The big rounded M, the double lines underneath, the little Y that curled like a tail, it was unmistakable. Is that the blanket box? Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. I think the blanket might be behind it. Daddy never lets me climb to see. Emily hesitated, heat prickling at the back of her neck. This felt private, like walking into someone else's bedroom uninvited, which, she reminded herself, she literally was. But also, they were just looking for a blanket. Okay, she said finally, dragging the desk chair over and testing it with a foot before climbing up. From this height, she could see the edges of the cardboard were a little worn, like it had been opened and closed dozens of times, the sticky note yellowed at the corners. She stretched for the soft blue blanket folded behind it, and the fabric caught on something, tugging the box forward just enough that the lid slipped askew. Inside, in the narrow gap that opened, she glimpsed a corner of a white hospital bracelet, the blurred edge of a photo, and a stack of envelopes kept together with a rubber band, the top one in a child's uneven handwriting that read, "To Mommy." Her breath caught, the room tilting for a moment as thunder grumbled distantly outside. "Be careful," Lily said nervously from below, and the wobble in her voice snapped Emily back. She freed the blanket, gently nudged the box back into place, hiding that heartbreaking sliver of contents from view. "Got it," she said brightly as she climbed down, shaking out the blue blanket and draping it over Lily's outstretched arms. They built the second fort in Lily's room, propped up by stuffed animals, and Lily chattered about giving the dolls snacks and making a sloth hospital for her toys. But the word mommy pulsed in Emily's mind with every heartbeat. That night, after Jason came home with raindrops in his hair and the smell of the subway clinging to his coat, after she told him about daycare's plumbing disaster and Fort Lily and the popcorn that had exploded all over the microwave, after Lily fell asleep halfway through a cartoon and Emily carried her upstairs, tucking her into bed with the blue blanket now smelling faintly of laundry detergent and storm air, she found Jason at the sink rinsing dishes, sleeves rolled up, wedding ring catching the light. She almost told him then, about the box, about the glimpse of hospital tags and letters, but the words tangled with her own uncertainty, and she heard herself say instead, "They said the streets might ice over tonight. You should drive slow tomorrow." And he gave that tired half-smile and said, "I always do." And she walked out into the chill with the ghost of that box sitting on her shoulder. In her cramped studio, lying on the futon with the heater rattling and the city noise leaking through the thin walls, she stared at the water stains on the ceiling and replayed everything she'd noticed in the past 6 weeks. The ring that never left his hand, the turned-away photo frame, the way he sometimes went very still when Lily laughed in a certain way, like a sound had punched him in the chest. Grief, she whispered into the dark, trying the word on her tongue. Not distance. Not an absent partner somewhere out there. Loss. A widow, not an absentee husband. The thought rearranged every story she told herself about this house, about this man, about the limit lines she'd drawn in her head to protect herself from impossible crushes on unavailable bosses. It didn't redraw those lines so much as blur them, make them sadder and more complicated, and weirdly, more human. She told herself firmly that it changed nothing. He was still her employer. He was still a man trying to hold his life together with a kid and a job and a history she couldn't possibly understand from the outside. She wasn't there to fix anything or fill any gaps or wander around opening metaphorical or literal boxes. She was there to work, to graduate, to move her own life forward,
even if part of her heart had quietly found a home in the warm chaos of his kitchen. The days that followed were filled with small, tender disasters. A cold snap turned the sidewalks into glass, and Jason started working from home more, laptop open at the dining table while he hopped between video calls, muting himself to say, "Show me your dragon drawing, kiddo," whenever Lily tugged his sleeve. Emily watched him juggle slide decks and snack requests, watched the way he always angled his laptop so Lily never wandered into frame when he was talking to strangers on screens, watched how he kept one ear tuned to his daughter's footsteps even when he seemed lost in some technical discussion about servers and deployment pipelines. The ring still glinted on his finger, but now that she had a name for Liz, the ghost in the closet, it looked less like a symbol of current commitment and more like a promise he'd made to someone he still loved fiercely, a promise he was trying like hell to keep by raising their child with gentleness and structure and dinosaur pancakes. One night, after another nightmare with dragons chasing Lily down grocery store aisles, Emily had lingered in the doorway of the little girl's room, picking up scattered stuffed animals, listening to Jason's low, steady voice through the wall as he soothed his daughter back to sleep. She didn't mean to end up outside his bedroom, but her feet carried her there, and when she nudged the door a little, she saw him propped against the headboard, Lily curled under his arm, the cloud blanket tucked around her, the blue light of the hall spilling softly across his features. "Is she okay?" she whispered, and he jumped, then exhaled. "Yeah," he said. "Bad dream. She gets him sometimes. Her mom, Liz, she used to have this whole thing where she'd turn the monsters into art projects." The way he said her name, like it was both sacred and ordinary, made my throat tighten. "You're doing great," I told him honestly. "She feels safe. You can see it in how she falls asleep on you like that." For a second his guard slipped, and I saw all the exhaustion and love and bone-deep fear behind his carefully controlled expression. "Thanks," he murmured, and our eyes held a moment longer than felt strictly professional before I mumbled goodnight and retreated down the hall with the knowledge of the mommy box in his closet and the weight it held, now not a secret I'd stumbled on, but a door he'd just cracked open a sliver by saying Liz's name out loud in the dark. The next big shift happened on a day that started with a fever. Lily woke up flush and clingy, whimpering that her throat hurt, and Jason, torn between a critical video call and a miserable child glued to his lap, looked at Emily with quiet desperation. "I'll move some things. I can come earlier tomorrow too if you need." "You already do more than enough," he started, but I cut him off gently by saying, "It's okay to let people help, you know?" And something in his expression flickered as if the words brushed against a sore spot he didn't show often. They spent the day tag-teaming cartoons, cold washcloths, and tiny doses of strawberry-flavored medicine. And by late afternoon, Lily had rallied just enough to commence a frantic search for her favorite plush sloth, who, she insisted, simply had to be in the fort because he gets scared of storms and of fevers. We searched Lily's room, the laundry basket, under the couch cushions, in every toy bin, but Slothy, weary, floppy Slothy, was nowhere to be found. "Maybe he's hiding in Daddy's closet," Lily said suddenly, with the unwavering logic of a sick child. "He likes the dark." My stomach clenched, but I forced a smile. "Okay, we can check, but no climbing, got it?" I said, and Lily solemnly agreed. In Jason's room, the light was soft and gold, late afternoon stretching long shadows across the floor. I opened the closet, scanning the bottom first. No sloth, just shoes and a half-full laundry basket. Lily crouched to peer under the hanging clothes while my gaze was inevitably drawn upward. The mommy box was still there, but the lid now sat a little more crooked, a thin flash of white visible along the edge, like someone had opened it recently and not quite closed it all the way. I rose on tiptoe, fingers hooking over the top shelf for balance, and told myself I was just checking for the sloth, that I could look behind the box without actually invading whatever memories were inside it. "What are you looking at?"
Lily asked from below, and Emily lied, "Just making sure nothing's going to fall on us. You stay back, okay?" That familiar roar of curiosity and guilt surged in her ears as she dragged the chair over again and climbed up, pressing a palm lightly on the lid of the box as she felt behind it.
No sloth, just dust and cardboard. She should have stepped down then, declared defeat, suggested they search the hall closet. Instead, the box tipped slightly under her hand and the lid slid another inch, revealing more of what lay inside. The folded hospital bracelets she'd glimpsed before, one clearly reading Elizabeth Cole, two smaller ones labeled Baby Girl Cole, threaded together on a pink ribbon. The stack of letters, some in a child's messy print, some in that same looping adult handwriting as the sticky note. A slim envelope stamped with the logo of a fertility clinic she recognized from subway ads, and that program from a memorial service, the date 3 years earlier, with a tiny printed photo of a woman who looked so much like Lily that it hurt. Dark hair, bright eyes, a smile that made her whole face seem lit from within. Emily's throat burned. "Did you find him?" Lily called, and Emily forced her fingers to unclench from where they'd started to curl around one of the letters. "Not yet," she managed, carefully easing the envelope back into place, coaxing the lid down flat again as if closing a wound, and sliding the box an inch farther back on the shelf to keep it from betraying itself so easily next time. When she climbed down and turned, Lily's anxious little face searching hers, she pasted on a smile and said, "He's not in there. That just looked like boring grown-up stuff. Let's try the living room again." And sure enough, they ultimately found Slothy wedged triumphantly between couch cushions, victorious in his hiding. But Emily's mind stayed upstairs, circling the box like a moth around the light, and by the time Jason came up to check on his dozing daughter later, she was still in the hallway pretending to fuss with laundry that didn't need sorting. When he thanked her for handling the great sloth crisis of the century and commented, "You look like you've seen a ghost," the truth slipped out before she could stop it. "I saw the box in your closet, the one labeled Mommy. I'm so sorry, I wasn't snooping. We were looking for the toy and it just—" She broke off, mortified, and watched his face freeze, watched his hand twitch toward his ring and then fall. After an awful heartbeat, he said, voice too flat, "It's okay. I should have put it somewhere else," and tried to brush it off. But she saw the way his shoulders hunched as if bracing for judgment. Instead of retreating, she slid down the hallway wall to sit opposite him when he finally sank to the floor. And in that narrow space, between a sleeping child's room and the bedroom with the box of grief in the closet, he told her, haltingly at first, and then in a rush, about Liz, the college girl who'd been a force of nature, the med student who'd dragged him to protests and made him dance badly in living room kitchens, the wife who'd insisted that having Lily was worth every risk, even with her heart condition, the new mother who'd had 2 days with her baby before her body gave out in a way no amount of modern medicine could fix. He told her how he'd sat in a hospital corridor holding a swaddled newborn, while a doctor with kind eyes said, "We did everything we could," and how he'd gathered the little bits of paper and plastic and ink from those days, bracelets, name tags, nurses' notes, funeral program, into that box, because leaving them scattered felt like letting the memories of those hours fracture. He told her how Lily called it the mommy box, how they opened it together sometimes when the missing got too big, how he closed it afterwards and shoved it back on the shelf, and rubbed his ring until his skin ached because taking it off felt like betrayal, even as wearing it sometimes felt like drowning in a life that no longer actually existed. Emily listened with tears slipping silently down her cheeks, not interrupting with platitudes, just sitting there in jeans and a worn sweater, knees drawn up, eyes soft and steady, and when he finally fell quiet and muttered, "I'm sorry, you didn't sign up for all of this," she shook her head and said, "I signed up to help your family. This is part of your family. You're not erasing her by living, you're carrying her." And the words seemed to hit him harder than anything else she'd said, his fingers unclenching from his ring, like he just realized he'd been strangling it. From that night onward, the house felt subtly different, as if some invisible window had been cracked open and a little fresh air was finally creeping through. Jason still wore the ring, but he touched it less compulsively. Emily still did school runs and snack prep and laundry, but now there was a layer of trust beneath every shared glance. They had seen something raw and terrible in each other and survived it. Lily noticed in the ways only kids do. One afternoon at the dining table, crayons scattered everywhere, she said casually, "Daddy cried last time we opened the mommy box." And when Emily, heart stuttering, asked, "How did that make you feel?" Lily shrugged and said, "Sad, but good too. Because I still cry, and I thought it might be wrong now that I'm big, but Daddy said grown-ups can cry forever if they miss someone, and that Mommy likes when we remember her. Then he said he's glad we have you too." The words settled in Emily's chest like warm sunlight. She smiled and answered, "I'm glad I have you guys." And Lily grinned and informed her cheerfully, "Daddy smiles way more now. He used to look like the tired owl from my book all the time." The slow, careful shift continued over weeks and months. Spring edging out the brutal Brooklyn winter, sidewalks thawing into chalk canvases for Lily's art, Emily acing her midterms with better grades than she dared to hope for because she now had a place to study in the evenings that wasn't a noisy laundromat. Jason working later at home sometimes, sliding her a cup of coffee across the table as she highlighted textbooks, both of them looking up at the same time more often and catching each other's eyes with shy, startled smiles. When Lily went to her grandparents' house in New Jersey for a weekend in May, the brownstone felt ghostly quiet, and Jason, awkward in the empty space, offered takeout and a movie instead of his usual, "You should go enjoy your free time." And she said yes, partly because the idea of her lonely studio felt even starker after months of this house's warm chaos, and partly because she could feel something unspoken humming between them and was tired of pretending she didn't. They ate pad thai and spring rolls on the couch, laughing at a dumb action movie, shoulders gradually drifting closer until his hand found hers on the couch cushion between them, not by accident or bump, but deliberately, fingers lacing with hers, calloused and warm. "I took it off yesterday," he said quietly, and for a second she didn't know what he meant until she looked at his left hand and saw the pale groove of skin where the wedding band had sat for years. "How do you feel?" she asked, because that was the question all her psych textbooks had trained her to ask, but also because she really wanted to know. "Strange," he admitted, staring at their joined hands. "Lighter and guilty and weirdly hopeful. I called Liz's mom before I did it. She cried and then called me an idiot for waiting this long and told me life doesn't stop just because your heart broke once, Jason. Liz would haunt you if you tried to live in that closet forever." He huffed a laugh at the memory, then sobered. "I don't want you to think this is me trying to replace her or patch something with the nearest convenient person. I like you, Emily Parker. Not as a stand-in, not as a bandage, but as you. And I want to see where this goes. Slowly, with Lily in the center of every decision and the truth always on the table, mommy box and all. If that's too much, I will respect that, and this will stay just a job. If it's not," he trailed off, leaving the rest hanging between them like a held breath. Emily squeezed his hand, heart pounding but weirdly calm. She said, "I'm not afraid of complicated. I'm afraid of pretending things don't matter when they really, really do. I like you too, and I already love her. So we go slow, we talk, we make sure Lily always knows her mom is her mom and that I'm me. We don't shove any boxes into dark corners and pretend they don't exist, and if it stops feeling right, we say that too." His shoulders dropped, tension leaking out as if someone had opened a valve. "Deal," he said. And the first soft kiss they shared a little while later, standing in the kitchen between the fridge and the stove where so much of their shared life happened, scraped knees bandaged, lunches packed, dragons drawn, felt less like lightning and more like a steady flame being gently sheltered from the wind. Somewhere upstairs, the mommy box sat in a new spot in the guest room closet, still reachable, but no longer the first thing he saw every morning, its contents unchanged, its meaning now part of a wider story that made room not just for what had been lost, but for what might carefully, honestly grow in the space left behind. A little girl who knew it was okay to cry forever if you miss someone, a man who had finally realized that living fully was not a betrayal of the dead, and a woman who had come looking for a part-time job and instead found herself slowly, steadily building a life in the in-between spaces of a Brooklyn brownstone where grief and hope lived side by side.